Oh, yeah.
See you. Happy Friday.
Nice to be with you.
Nice to see you.
You got a little chuckle on a Friday. You're happy.
I love Fridays. I'm crazy about them. Although it's a cold day.
It is.
I think
It's hot
winter's
in here,
back.
though.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm ready for it. I'm ready. The heat wave is coming.
All right. Well, let's get started. We begin with Attorney General Jeff Sessions recusing himself from any Russia or campaign-related probes. This as he's facing a storm of criticism from Democrats who claim he lied about his contacts with Russia's ambassador during his confirmation hearings. But Sessions denies any wrongdoing and is slamming his critics.
I think it was hyped beyond reason, and I think it was unfair. I don't believe anybody that was in that meeting would have seen or believed I said one thing that was improper or unwise. And it was really a sad thing to be attacked like that, but I think we've explained it, and we intend to move forward.
President Trump is also backing Sessions, saying he has total confidence in his attorney general, and then tweeted, quote, Jeff Sessions is an honest man. He did not say anything wrong. He could have stated his response more accurately, but it was clearly not intentional. This whole narrative is a way of saving face for Democrats losing an election that everyone thought they were supposed to win. The Democrats are overplaying their hand. They lost the election, and now they have lost their grip on reality. The real story is all of the illegal leaks of classified and other information. It is a total witch hunt. Meantime, Democrats say Sessions' recusal is not enough and want him to resign, as others are demanding he return to Capitol Hill to explain his testimony. Watch.
I found his explanation simply not credible. You don't, I think, treat a visit in your office by the Russian ambassador as something casual, something not memorable.
The United States Attorney General should be brought back to the Judiciary Committee so we can know why he apparently falsely denied that he had meetings with the Russians.
It is clear that the recusal is not enough. This is the top law enforcement officer of the nation. He was under oath. And when you lie under oath, that's called perjury, and you go to jail for doing that.
All right, so Juan, I know you're going to have some strong thoughts on this, but let's go first back to how Jeff Sessions is firing back here, calling the criticism hyped and unfair, and then he has the president backing him up, saying this is a total witch hunt.
Well, I think they're politicizing it. I understand it.
They're politicizing it.
Extremely. I mean, a witch hunt, that's what a witch hunt is you're going after somebody really with no basis or justification, Sandra. And I think that's what they're trying to suggest, that this is all about politics. In fact, in the president's tweet, he refers to the election and that there's sour grapes coming from Democrats who still can't believe they lost the election.
Not the first time we've heard him say that.
Right, but that's what the president's saying, I think. So that's why I say politicize, because I don't think there's any debate, and you, Attorney General Sessions, formerly Senator Sessions, was very clear in a statement yesterday when he came before the cameras that he felt he had made a mistake. He could have been more forthcoming. He said he should have gone a little slower and thought about his response because he had met with the Russian ambassador. And the fact that he then has to come forward and say, yeah, I did have 2 meetings, in fact, that doesn't look great for the man who's our top law enforcement
officer. Are you in the camp
officer.
that the recusal is not enough and that he needs to
No,
resign?
I think recusal, in fact, I think that he did a great favor to President Trump because he's added to the integrity of whatever findings come from the FBI. I think that he has said, you know, I am standing by the recommendations of my own staff. So he's made it very clear that he's doing the right thing. But the politics of it are large because I think there's so many on the right specifically who say, where's the evidence? What is this about?
Yeah, whoa, wait a minute. Because there's some people on the left, too. Okay, so Adam Schiff comes out of that same meeting yesterday with the chair, okay, with the House Intel chair. They come out of the same meeting, and one says, no, we don't have the evidence, we need whistleblowers, right? Nunez, the chair. And then the guy on your side of the political aisle says, well, I can't really talk about what is there. That would be talking about an investigation. If you have evidence, all you have to do is say yes or no. So I'm curious to see what evidence that they're looking at. What are they trying to prove?
Well, no, I had a different readout.
Something untoward happened in
I have a different readout from that meeting.
Because
as I think,
you want to talk about politics. Why isn't it enough for him to recuse himself for other Democrats? Why
no. I'm saying I thought it was enough, but I'm saying I understand people
Why is it not
who
enough for many
we
in your
just saw
party?
in that package. I think people feel that especially now, when you have a critical issue confronting our top law enforcement officer, for him to have put himself in a position where his credibility might be questioned because he didn't he wasn't forthcoming. He didn't tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in his confirmation hearings. It opens the doors to politics and people who are highly critical of him.
But there was even a sort of an admission from the president himself that he could have made his statement more accurately. Sort of a concession coming from him. Is that going to be enough, Megan?
Listen, I think this is why transparency is so important in all administrations, why you have to have an absolute crackerjack communications team working for you. I think this is a communications problem more than anything else. I saw a tweet last night that showed the Russian ambassador present at Donald Trump's address this week, and I was shocked. I was like, wait, so he's coming to address this? He's gone to the White House. He's met with Claire McCaskill. He's met with many senators. So this is my problem with this, is clearly, and he came under an Obama State Department project. That's why this ambassador was present at the speech this week. So this is my problem with Democrats right now. If you're going to accuse Jeff Sessions, if you want him to step down, come out, have the chutzpah to accuse him of being a mole between Russia and the campaign. You have no evidence. And at this point, my biggest problem is for those of us, again, I've said this on the couch, and Juan, I've talked to you about this at length. For those of us that have actual problems with Vladimir Putin, the fact that he's bombing hospitals in Aleppo, the politicization of this takes away from real concerns about Russia. And again, if you're going to go after Jeff Sessions this way, you got to go full blown and accuse him of being a mole for the Trump campaign. But all of you have no evidence to do it, and that's why you're not doing it. And in the meantime, if you have a problem with Russian ambassadors being present places, don't invite him to speak in front of our president at the biggest speech of his presidency thus far.
I keep trying to dig down deeper and deeper and understand what's the there. I mean, I don't understand. At the very end of the day, as we continue to make these connections and say this one met in this office and these people had this phone call, what is it that we're after? Was there a quid pro quo? Are we looking for evidence of a you do this, I'll do that? Or like when President Obama said, I'll have a lot more leeway in my second administration or whatever it is? I mean, what are we looking for? And how in God's name, if it's there, have we not found it yet? Because everybody's been working on this
That is the question that I was asking Juan. What are they after to prove? Because when you look at someone I've known her whole political career is Senator Claire McCaskill. When I lived in Kansas City, she was a local prosecutor. Right. So when you look at the arc of her career, she's not a woman who's known for not remembering big events. Yet she tweeted about meeting with the very Russian ambassador and couldn't remember when she was asked about it, but said, well, it wasn't like we had set up, it wasn't like he had reached out to me or I had reached, I don't know how it came together, but y'all met.
No,
and you
no,
did it more than twice. You did it more than once. She did it twice.
The distinction she made is that she didn't have a one-on-one meeting with the ambassador. It was in a large group. That was her distinction. Yes, he did. He had. Wait a second. Let's agree on one fact. The ambassador came to the senator's office on Capitol Hill.
It wasn't one-on-one.
The other people came in, but it was an arranged meeting one-on-one.
Wait, let me get in here and make it very clear that there is no proof of intention, and that is the president's point. He could have made his statements more accurately, more clearly for the American public, but there's no proof of or any evidence of intention to mislead the public.
But the root
no.
The
question. I'm sorry. Just give me a second, Megan.
Yeah, of course.
My point was that when you have people who are, for some reason, not owning up to these meetings, it creates an ambient of suspicion. People are like, what are you guys hiding?
That was purposeful.
Why is Mike Flynn not telling us he had meetings and suddenly we discover? Why is he deceiving the vice president?
Mike Flynn's gone, by the way.
Yes, and why is Jeff Sessions having meetings and then coming before the Congress and not saying, yes, I had a meeting? What's the big deal?
Megan,
what's he hiding?
The problem for me, again, is that if this man is allowed to be present with all of our elected officials to listen to our president speak, he can't be that nefarious of an individual. So having Jeff Sessions meet with him after Democrats and our former president have also met with him.
That's a great point.
What is nefarious
But so let me bring this back to the politicization of this that you started out with, Juan. And are Democrats overplaying their hand here, as the president is suggesting?
100%.
Well, I think they are, because I think that the recusal really was sufficient. I don't think that there's some arguments. I think we just heard some people say, well, he might be guilty of perjury. I just think that's pushing it too far, and I think that puts the Democrats in
because that's what Nancy Pelosi said in a written statement.
Well, clearly everybody, from, as you pointed out, Sandra, the president to Jeff Sessions have said, he should have handled this differently. I don't think there's any argument about that.
Claire
But I will say this. Allow me to finish this point.
Go ahead.
That when you hear people say, what's the evidence? Because I think Melissa was asking us, what are we going after?
What are we going after?
But I think you got to remember, Melissa, now Mike Flynn is gone, as Sandra pointed out. Jeff Sessions and all of this controversy, people who were the Trump campaign manager, Paul Manafort, had to leave. Carter Page was on TV last night. He's an associate of Trump saying, yes, I had meetings with Russian officials. And now you get things like, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, saying, yeah, I was in one of the meetings with Mike Flynn. And at some point you start to think about, no, but remember the CIA, the National Security Agency, the FBI have put their name on and stamp on a report that said Russia was out to undermine democracy, damage and denigrate Hillary Clinton, and they favored Donald Trump.
Well, that was a great preview of what's coming up on Outnumbered. We're going to be talking more about that in a little bit.
Oh, my gosh, it's a heat wave.
Hold on, you're bringing it. All right, tonight, be sure to tune into Special Report. Brett Baer will be talking to House Speaker Paul Ryan. They will discuss all the big issues going on right now, including the recusal of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Russian interference in the election, and the push to repeal Obamacare. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on Fox News Channel.
A fine Friday. Glad you're with us as we await President Trump's revised travel ban, which is now expected to come next week. Potential backlash is brewing overseas. The European Union's parliament is calling on the bloc to require American tourists visiting Europe to first obtain visas because the U.S. excludes 5 EU countries from its no visa policy. But the Wall Street Journal is suggesting there's more to it than that. They wrote this, quote, while the request is non-binding and unlikely to change EU policy, it reflects hostility among some European politicians to the Trump administration. The vote comes after the parliament publicly condemned the president's executive order banning travelers from 7 majority Muslim countries, end quote. Melissa, I'm coming to you first on this. You've traveled a lot in Europe. I mean, what does this mean, the big picture?
You know, I think I sort of take the opposite point of view of this, is that if everybody's going to start cracking down and having IDs and using visas, that's a good thing. I mean, they're saying that that this is sort of a backlash against Trump. Probably true, probably against his policy. But maybe it's time for a little while for everybody to have a little bit more identification, to know who's traveling from one country to the next. I mean, we have seen some awful things go on around the world,
particularly in Europe.
We're almost used to it. We're almost immune to it at this point. When we see someone barrel through traffic, and I understand, I can feel people yelling at the screen that it's not always about somebody crossing borders. So much of it is homegrown. Okay, so let's protect against what we can.
But even in the homegrown nature of it all, what we learned from the things that were carried out from people living in Belgium and Molenbeek, and how they were easily going to Paris and other places after they had gone in and out of Syria. I mean, that's the bigger issue. If you're going to track people, maybe, in fact, this does give you a better way to do that, particularly in a part of the world that hasn't done it recently or well, Europe.
Absolutely.
But Juan, let me get your response to the Wall Street Journal saying that there's more to it than that, than what we just see on the surface, saying that it reflects hostility among some European politicians to the Trump administration. Is that the way you see things?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I heard what Melissa said, but I think that for the moment, just in isolation, what you have is a political blowback coming from other countries who say, oh, you think you're the only one who can act to limit who comes and goes in your country, but if that's what you want to do, hey, guess what? Summer's coming. All these American tourists are coming, and they're going to feel a little bit of this tension too.
And I think that's intended. They're going to punish their own economy.
No, but they're intending. They are, but they are intending to punish Donald Trump. But I think right now on the stove, we talked about heat waves and cold days. Right now on the stove, you have the Trump administration really stuck on its ban, the ban that they had on refugees and people coming from countries previously identified as host of terrorists, or some people call them the 7 Muslim majority countries. And the Trump people are still struggling.
With governments.
I
think the reason why they're distinct is not because they're majority Muslim countries. Otherwise, Saudi Arabia would be on that list.
I think they're changing.
That have broken down governments.
Well, I think
Iraq is supposedly coming off that list.
Yes.
So it could soon be 6.
Yes, but I'm saying the point is it's widely perceived as a Muslim ban, especially in Europe.
Because people are saying things like that.
Well, saying things like
communication.
Okay, but I'm just saying, all I'm doing is dealing with the political reality. I think that's what the Wall Street Journal was picking up on. But also part of this is I think the reason for the continued delay of something we expected a while back is that the Trump administration is still struggling to find the trigger to justify it because, as you know, there have been reports out that said, in fact, the people who have committed acts of terrorism have not come from those countries.
Well, the majority of them actually have come from places like Saudi Arabia.
They're
on the list.
Gee, now you're really saying things you shouldn't say around here. Well, holy smokes, because I think a lot of people are upset.
The facts are not fungible.
Megan, we haven't heard from you.
I actually think it's really sad that 27.4 million U.S. citizens visited Europe last year, 8% increase. And listen, I'm with you that I don't necessarily have a problem with visas coming into place. I think if you're in Europe right now, especially Germany, and you have porous borders, you're probably not against having a stricter immigration plan. But the fact that it's sort of in a backlash to the United States and to President Trump, diplomacy is important all the way around. And we're still, you know, diplomatic Western civilizations need to band together in times like this, especially when ISIS is on the rise. So I don't like the idea of a breakdown with the trust between us and Europe.
Real quickly, Juan, before we move on, where are the Democrats on this issue? Because I know that pre-election you didn't have a lot of Democrats wanting to talk about this type of, and this is not new material from the president. So I'm wondering going forward, notwithstanding all the attorneys that are waiting at airports again, but where are people in your party on this issue?
Well, I think that what you see is concern that there's a violation in terms of if it's a Muslim ban, Melissa. The perception, I don't know the reality, but the perception and the fact that you had Rudy Giuliani saying the president had asked him to look for how he could do this legally. I think that the president has the right answer, that this is a national security issue. This is not about discrimination. It's about keeping America safe. That's the best argument. He just needs to justify it. He can't just say it. He has to explain it, make the case to us, the American people.
All right. You get the last word.
Oh, okay.
More contacts between Trump associates and Russia's ambassador are now surfacing, reportedly. Who else was in touch with that same ambassador? And whether anybody really did anything wrong. And reports that Barack Obama, former president, is making a comeback and that his new D.C. home will be the nerve center, not my words, for the mounting insurgency against President Trump. You don't want to miss this.
On the heels of Attorney General Jeff Sessions' decision to recuse himself from any Russia or campaign-related investigations, more contacts between Trump associates and the Kremlin's ambassador are coming to light. Fox News confirming the president's son-in-law and top aide, Jared Kushner, joined ousted advisor Michael Flynn when he met with the Russian ambassador in December. A senior White House official says it was just a 10-minute introductory meeting to set up a line of communication. Meantime, CNN is reporting 3 other men who were serving as national security advisors to Mr. Trump also met with the Russian ambassador during the Republican National Convention in July. All right, so reportedly there were other meetings that took place with those inside the Trump world. Your thoughts on this?
Well, so, you know, Melissa was asking earlier, you know, so what's the heart and soul? Is the heart and soul of the investigation, Sandra, would be if the FBI agents could find out that there was coordination between the Trump campaign and these Russian agents in an effort to influence the outcome of the election. So far, they have got nothing, or we know nothing at this point.
You wouldn't send the ambassador to do that. I mean, this is what I don't get. An ambassador is here to meet with people, right? Isn't that why you send an ambassador to a foreign country?
You know, oftentimes you have spies hidden in embassies.
Right. So you have a problem with all of this.
But that's not the ambassador.
You have a problem with all of this.
I don't. If I knew something, I would be in better shape. But what I'm saying is,
well, no, if everybody knew something, then we'd have evidence.
Yeah,
everybody
right.
Would be
But you must say, if you're a conscious human being at this point, you're like, why are they having all these meetings, and why are we just learning now, and why doesn't anybody? No. But
he's an ambassador.
Yeah,
that's what ambassadors do. They
correct. So then Jeff Sessions had no reason not to say, oh yeah, and guess what? I had a meeting with the ambassador.
Okay, that actually is a good point. If Obama hadn't been trying to normalize everything with Putin for the past 10 years and let an ambassador come over here and meet with everybody, you guys wouldn't be having these problems. So maybe you should have taken Putin seriously for the past 10 years. This is your problem that you guys made, and I have no sympathy. I say this on the couch for Democrats right now who all of a sudden care about Russia, care about Putin because it's politically expedient.
Okay, so going back to the original question, is any meeting okay? And especially, I mean, as you guys are eloquently pointing out, he is an ambassador. Take a look at this photo. This is Kislyak at the joint session this week.
That's what I brought up.
When the president addressed the joint session of Congress.
Who he's sitting with. He's
Democrats.
He's with Democrats. So I did a little look into Sergei Kislyak. The meeting obviously took place, whatever. He's one of Russia's most direct links formerly to the Obama administration at a time when a war of words over Crimea had plunged relations between Washington and Moscow. They were in very tight contact. He's an ambassador, as Melissa has pointed out. So again, I ask for the evidence on behalf of anybody who would like the truth. What evidence is there that meeting with the man who was sitting among Democrats, what's wrong with meeting with him?
Nothing. I don't think that's the argument. Nobody says there's anything wrong on the face of it.
Okay.
The problem is, one, and I think Megan was pointing this out, you know, he's got his own history, and the Russians have a history of recruiting people and all that. People are a little suspicious when you suddenly appear with him and you don't admit that you had the meeting.
Did you know he was going to the joint session?
No, I wouldn't.
So that seems sudden, didn't it?
No, come on. Ambassadors, in fact, there's a whole section of ambassadors.
So what you're saying is what we knew yesterday, and that is that the thing that Jeff Sessions is guilty of is that he didn't extrapolate out the details, the facts. He should have mentioned, yes, as a senior member of the Armed Services Committee, I did meet with. I'm sure that's what Claire McCaskill would say. She's had several statements on her meeting that she couldn't remember with the same Russian ambassador.
Well, it's why transparency is
so why do you
important.
believe one but not the other, I guess, is my question for you.
It's why transparency is important. It's why having great communications is important. A lot of this is muddled up. The communications on the side of the Trump administration has not been great. But going forward, if this man is nefarious, if he is, as people are implying, some kind of agent between Putin and the United States of America, he has absolutely no business sitting in front of our president, sitting with Democrats, meeting with people left and right. But this is why you have to take hard lines on issues like your relationship with murderous KGB dictators. And when you let it fly, they haven't done anything wrong. Jeff Sessions didn't do anything different than President Obama did.
But let's go back to what is normal dealings and what is not, Juan. And let's go back to what we do know, because Fox News has confirmed that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and top aide, did join Michael Flynn, who is now ousted, when he met with the Kremlin's ambassador in December. We know that that happened. It was a 10-minute discussion, an introductory conversation. Is that a normal dealing?
Yeah, you know, it's not abnormal for people to meet ambassadors. I mean, especially if you're an incoming administration, you're trying to develop lines of contact. What's abnormal is when I was listening to you, Sandra, read the introduction, is how many of the Trump inner circle has had regular contact with Russian officials, and we never knew about it until now. Now everybody's, oh yeah, I did too, and I did too. Wait, what's going on here?
I mean, we keep seeing pictures of him everywhere. I'm starting to think maybe he was the one lucky guy at some point, this ambassador. He's everywhere.
Hey, I'm not a spy.
Megan said that puts really a fine point on the facts, too, is that if the Trump administration, from the very beginning, when people were asking for more vetting of their cabinet-level nominees, if they had succumbed to that and done it more traditionally, some of this might have been avoided.
100%. It's a communications problem. They have communications problems, but anyway. All right, we're going to move on. Former President Barack Obama's, I could talk about this all day, we got to move on. His new home in D.C. is reportedly being set up as the nerve center for the mounting resistance against President Donald Trump. According to the Daily Mail, the Obama's longtime confidant Valerie Jarrett has even moved into the mansion to help with the effort. Reportedly says Mr. Obama is getting ready to make a public reappearance into politics by helping to fight GOP gerrymandering so more Democrats are elected. Politico quoting him as saying, "It's coming. He's coming, and he's ready to roll. President Obama will be a more visible part of the effort." Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Is it weird Valerie Jarrett's moving in with them?
Why do you look at me when you ask that question?
Because I think I know how you
grown people who want to live together, that's none of my business.
What happens between consenting adults?
I mean, where do you want me to take that?
She was in the White House as well, living in the White House for a period of time.
Different kind of a quarters.
Different kind of a quarters.
I don't know, that looks pretty castle-y.
Well, that house is fab.
It's gorgeous.
I mean, you can Google it.
The point is, she is his President Obama's most trusted confidant for decades. So clearly, this is sort of going to be home base, you know, whatever, ground zero
Route 6 grade.
for the resistance. But if your resistance didn't work against Hillary Clinton, why is it going to work now?
You know, it's an interesting question about what their goals are, because, you know, is it resistant totally, or are they also trying to redefine themselves as somebody who, you know, is of the people for the people? I think when you have Obama for America as your group, and then you lose 1,000 seats since you took president across state houses, the U.S. Congress, and the presidency, it gets to be the point where maybe I need some redefinition here. So it could be resistance. It could also be that.
Well, I think, remember, he's the most prominent Democrat in the country at this moment.
Very true.
He was behind Tom Perez's victory last weekend to become head of the Democratic National Committee. So I don't think there's any question that he's going to play a role. And it's not news, by the way, that he and Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, say they want to do something about the tremendous success Republicans have had at drawing congressional lines around the country to the benefit of the congressional delegation to keep Republicans in power in the Congress. We're approaching 2020. That's the time when the next lines will be drawn for Congress, and he wants to play a role. There's nothing illegitimate about that.
I just thought he was on Richard Branson's island, you know, kite surfing. I can't believe that so quickly he wants to get back involved in everything that's going on. I mean, the only reason I can think of is preservation of the legacy, that he sees things being dismantled and wants to get involved and try and do something about it. I mean, just setting up in this castle with Valerie Jarrett is really.
But wait, I don't think anybody was saying. So going back to your last words, you don't think there's anything illegitimate about that? About a former president just out of office setting up a nerve center for Trump resistance to go against the current president after he promised a peaceful transition of power and that he was going to give the guy a shot?
I think he did have a peaceful transition of power. I think President Trump has even said
6 weeks
that he thought he was treated very well. But your point is about the politics, right? And I think that, coming back to your point, President Obama, during his era, saw Democrats lose a lot of seats.
I'm not even talking about the politics. I'm talking about there's a general level of respect for a former president.
Well, I think until he does something disrespectful, let's see it. I mean, President Bush was out this week, and President Bush.
Let me name one thing that he did that maybe would have told us that this was coming, and that's when the discussion first was brought up around inauguration of within 1 hour you'd see a repeal and replace of Obamacare. Remember what he told his political party at the time? Don't rescue the Republicans. Don't help them. You're going to need everybody on board in order to make it better for the American people. But you've got a former president saying to his party, don't participate in a positive way.
And President George W. Bush.
That's disrespectful.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Oh, I think
I do.
And so was it disrespectful when you didn't have any Republicans participating in trying to craft and improve Obamacare?
You did.
Oh, no. I think when it was voted, I don't think there was a Republican vote. And subsequent to that, when Obamacare, when it's had its troubles, no Republicans would participate. They'd say, hey, listen, we think this whole thing has to be gutted. Well, now, look at it. Look at yourselves now, baby.
They executive ordered their way through it, President Obama. So he couldn't even lean on his own party. But we could talk after.
There is power in silence. Look at how powerful President George W. Bush's recent statements have been in the past week, you know, when he's been going on several different television shows. His statements have made international news. He had very interesting, I believe, introspective views on what it's like to be in and both out of power. And I think if you let the next president do what he's going to do, sit back and then choose your timing, it's a heck of a lot more powerful than starting in some kind of weird nerve center 6 weeks after the election. All right, a judge sparking outrage after allegedly helping an illegal immigrant escape her courtroom as ICE agents waited in the hallway. The furious reaction from law enforcement.
New questions about whether some officials are openly defying President Trump on immigration. Let's start in Oregon, where a judge is under investigation for allegedly helping an illegal immigrant elude ICE agents. The incident happened in January when a Mexican national appeared before a judge in a DUI case. When the court staff noticed ICE agents in the hallway, federal prosecutors say the judge allowed the suspect to leave through her private entrance. Though the suspect was later nabbed, the U.S. attorney for Oregon is outraged. Watch.
I felt that it was inappropriate and delegitimizes the work of ICE agents who are out there doing their jobs.
Now let's go to Virginia. The Democratic governor there, Terry McAuliffe, has issued new guidelines which instruct schools not to disclose a student's immigration status and requires immigration officials to present a warrant before entering school grounds. The governor says in a release this quote, President Trump's unprecedented modifications to long-standing immigration policies have led to fear and uncertainty in many of our communities. My administration remains committed to honoring our constitutional obligation to provide each and every pupil with a free and high-quality public education regardless of immigration status, end quote. Juan?
Well, did Donald Trump order people into schools? I must have missed that. I don't think that's true. But I mean, I agree with Governor McAuliffe that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they have an agreement to educate all children. And I think that's honorable. I understand it. But I don't know. I know there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of concern. Let's not overhype it. Is President Trump ordering people into schools? I haven't heard that part. I know there's a lot of concern about what's going on at airports. I heard about Muhammad Ali's
There are a lot of attorneys
kids
there to help that out.
Yeah, a kid being stopped and questioned, where's your name from and all this. But I just want to stay grounded.
Melissa? I mean, when we look at the school thing, I guess what bothers me about that is the idea that, you know, if you're not here illegally and you're not paying taxes and you're not part of the system, I don't know why you're drawing on it. And it just doesn't seem like, I mean, we can't have a social welfare state where we're giving away a lot of stuff and have an open border. It doesn't work. I mean, we're so deeply in debt as it is. If you want your kids to go to school here, you need to become a citizen. You got to go register. You got to get IDs. You have to do it the right way. I mean, it's just, it's part of the order and organization. I mean, we're all here paying our taxes, doing our duty. That's the way it goes.
So, Sandra, you know, what I said in that open intro was that there are some who are openly defying the president. You have a situation where it might not be defying the president, but you've got Houston that's opted out of the program to use its local police as part of immigration gathering, which is something that the president has said he wants. You saw San Francisco do the same thing this morning. We're not going to use our police departments to help in the immigration process.
So this was an instance, obviously, where immigration laws were being defied and ignored and gone against. I think what right now is, 6 weeks into this new administration, is we're looking for some sort of trend. Are we seeing any trend like that? Are you?
Well, I mean, what we know is that there has been an increase in the number of people being deported who are not, to reiterate, guilty of committing any felonies and crimes. Under President Obama, he went after people who were lawbreakers. President Trump has come in and said, we're going to get any illegal involved with violence and crime, the gangbangers, we're going to get them out of here. But there's about 25% that, in fact, are things like, I mean, you know, just to be somewhat hyperbolic, you know, things like parking tickets, traffic violations.
Yeah. You realize being here illegally means you've already broken the law.
Well, let me just say, you know, you can stick with that, and that's what I was listening to Melissa say, but you know what? There are about
that's
11...
Not what I was saying. That's not what I was saying at all. I mean, I was talking about the fact that I mean, from an economic point of view, more people is a larger economy is better. I know that's an unpopular point of view. I don't want people to go home. I want them to pay taxes.
But they do pay taxes.
On the system.
Well, I'm saying...
No, I mean, what you're talking about, people who are here illegally, who have their kids in school, are working illegally, are being paid in cash. I mean, they're not paying taxes.
No. In fact, one of the arguments is they often have phony Social Security numbers to get the job.
Percentage.
I don't think so.
I think
there's
the economics of that. That's a small percentage.
Well, I just think a lot of them have phony IDs.
Aren't paying into it. I'm up. Join the system, pay into it, then draw on it.
Megan?
I mean, I was focusing on the judge helping an illegal immigrant escape ICE.
Out the back door.
I think there's a real problem in this country with a lot of people not understanding what their jobs are and what their role is. If you want to be a vigilante for illegal immigrants and you want to do whatever you want to do, even if I don't think it's particularly ethical, that's fine. But don't be a judge at the same time. If you want to be a commentator, don't go on TV and espouse yourself to be a journalist at the same time. And when everything is so muddled and so politicized, then nothing ever really gets done. And I just don't understand why you as a judge would be helping to actively break the law when your job is literally to stop that from happening.
And it also speaks to the issue of sanctuary jurisdictions, too. Just how far does that go? Is it really just you don't go after people? Is it just that you're hiding them? Or is it that you're letting them evade the law? It's an excellent question.
As a judge.
All right. Well, he has repeatedly complained about overly negative news coverage, and now a new report shows maybe President Trump is onto something. We'll break down just how negative the mainstream media coverage really is.
More Outnumbered in just a moment, but first to John Scott with what's coming up in the second hour of Happening Now. Hi, John.
Hey, Megan. In our next hour, we are expecting a speech from Vice President Mike Pence. We will carry some of that live, assuming it happens on time. It comes as we get new information on the investigations into Russian involvement in the presidential election. We'll also have more on the repeal and replace efforts on Obamacare and why those plans are being kept under lock and key. All ahead. Happening Now. Megan.
Looking forward to it, John.
Thanks.
A new survey revealing some interesting stats on the mainstream media's coverage of President Trump. A nonpartisan independent media research firm collected data from top evening news shows starting on January 20th, which was the day that President Trump took office, through February 17th. The findings showing only 3% of news broadcasts on NBC Nightly News and CBS Evening News about the president were considered positive, with 43% negative and 54% considered neutral. Fox News Channel Special Report was analyzed as well and was found to have the highest percentage of neutral stories at 63%. Juan, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's evidence of bias. And, you know, people think oftentimes they say to me, you know, oh, so many of the reporters in this country are liberals. And I think it's true. The question is, how do you measure the fact that in so many cases these days, reporters feel that the Trump administration will give distorted visions of things, tell outright lies in some cases, and if the reporters call them on it, is that a negative story or is that a neutral story? You know, people talk about Scott Pelley coming on CBS and saying, oh gosh, President Trump held this thing today and he had so many distortions. Well, is that appropriate for Pelley, or is in fact Pelley properly giving the American audience a view of what's going on with this president? That's the tension there.
Is it maybe the language, Harris? I mean, because when I think back, because I agree with a lot of what you just said, and as I watch these reports, I kind of think to myself, why does this feel so negative? Is it because they're reporting things where they feel like he's been disingenuous, or is it the language about it? Because one thing he said, like, in an administration that seems out of touch with reality or something, or it's sort of, as opposed to saying, you know, we fact-checked that wasn't accurate, it's like, sometimes it's the language. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, congratulations to Brett Baer for doing the great job that we all know that he does as a journalist. So, my friend, you rock. Next point that I'd like to make is going to sound a little old school. So news used to be a loss leader, meaning if it got ratings and it helped the network in some way and it made some extra money, great. But it made its money, the networks originally, the original alphabet soup networks, made their money off of their programming, their comedies, their whatever. Now news is a ratings and revenue generator. And when you mix those two things together, it becomes difficult to then show value to just the fact gathering, which is why you can turn on some networks and you'll see at the bottom of the screen things like, oh, we're doing a countdown till Trump messes up again on Twitter after his big speech. I mean, how is that news exactly? How is that news? Now, if you want to cover what the president tweets, that's one thing.
Even more importantly, another study this week by NBC News Wall Street Journal, a poll found that the American public aren't suckers, and the election is proof of that. In the face of all that negative media coverage, Donald Trump still won. This poll found that roughly 51% of Americans thought the press was too critical of the new president. Only 41% thought that the press had been mostly fair and objective in their coverage of Trump. So the media can dish out whatever they want, but the American people largely are seeing straight through that.
No, but your point is, and I think the point of the poll is, people see the press as hypercritical of this president. But it's not the case that they dismiss what the press is reporting, because I think we had a poll from Quinnipiac last week that said if between the president and the press, most Americans believe the press. They still think the press plays a very important role. The question is, at what point does it become hostile, and do people think, you know what, you guys are going way overboard? The infotainment angle that you're talking about.
Yeah. No, she's right. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I have been in this industry a long time. I've worked at a lot of different places. And when you're a Republican, and I'm a conservative analyst, not a journalist like Harris, and there's, as we've talked at length, there needs to be a clear differentiation between those things on all networks at all times. But it's always 9 liberals and then the token Republican. And I used to joke that I was the token Republican on panels, and that's part of the problem. When you're looking at other networks and only one Republican gets one voice on a giant panel of people, and I think this is the chickens coming home to roost, as I've said many times in this specific election cycle, where there was just a complete and total breakdown of trust, and it's unfortunate.